and welcome to Real 2021. I'm Hannah, I'm a second year adult nursing student.
I'm Ruth, I'm a second year medical student. And if you're wondering why you're in our fridge...
Maybe they hadn't worked out that they're in our fridge. You are in our fridge.
You are in our fridge.
Yeah.
We're about to bake a cake, so we need to get some ingredients out.
We do. So, hang on.
Eggs.
You need eggs and some butter.
Butter.
And I think
tea.
that's all we need from our fridge. So stay tuned to see some amazing videos from other members of the CU, some great testimonies and a lovely talk from Mike. We're interspersed with us randomly baking a cake. I hope you enjoy this video.
See you in a minute. So Hannah, what's today's video actually going to be about?
Well, today's video is on the topic of peace.
Oh, okay.
More specifically, how can we find peace in an unpredictable world?
Okay. All of the videos this week and next week going to be about peace?
No, so the videos in the next 2 weeks are going to have a lot of different themes, from how can I truly be myself to what actually helps when everything hurts. So lots of different themes.
They sound really interesting. I'm going to try and get to as many as possible.
And the even better thing is, if you've got a lecture and you can't make a video, make watching a live video, they're going to be available afterwards to watch as well.
So even if I'm in my lectures, I can still watch the videos?
Exactly.
That's really exciting. So I think we've got someone from CU coming to talk to us about peace.
We do. We've got a lovely video now from the amazing Ryan, who's a member of the CU here at UEA, and he's going to tell us a little bit about a situation when he felt peace.
Hi, my name's Ryan. I'm a first year education student, and at a time in my life where I've really felt God's peace and presence was a few years ago here in Catton Park, which is like my headspace place, and it was following a really difficult evening where I won't go into the specifics of it, but one of those kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place kind of feelings, and not much I could do about it, and this is really tough. I remember coming to here the following day and just crying and venting at God and just asking, like, why has this happened? Why is this happening? Where are you? What are you doing? And as I kind of was like looking at the ground, I saw this beautiful blue beetle, like kind of cyan, very bright, luminous colour. I haven't seen anything like it before, haven't seen anything since. Not sure what it was, but it was incredible, and it kind of just reminded me that God's beauty and presence is there even in the tough times, and even when it's really difficult, and even when it's really hard to see, God's still there, and his peace is still with us.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for that video. It's so great to be reminded of when God can bring that peace into your life. Have you ever felt a time where you felt really peaceful?
You know what? I actually feel most peaceful when I'm baking, especially if I'm listening to a worship song at the same time.
I can relate to that. I can agree with that.
So I think we've got another video from a CU member coming up, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Next up, we've got a lovely video from another CU member talking about how God has brought peace into a situation in her life. Over to you, Hannah.
Another Hannah.
It's a good name.
Hi there, I'm Hannah, and I could talk about many ways in which God's peace is in my life. However, one way which He's drawn me into His presence a lot lately is on my countryside walks. I'm blessed to be able to be surrounded by so much nature and so many animals, and it's just brought me so much peace, especially when I reach the top of the hill and I can see the incredible view of the whole countryside. And it just reminds me of the many times in the Bible where Jesus met with God and prayed with Him on top of a hill, just on His own. And in those moments I just feel such peace and such a presence with me. And one verse that's really stood out to me when thinking about peace is in Proverbs 14, verse 30. It says, "A heart at peace gives life to the body." And I'm just so encouraged by that, because at the moment we can feel so lifeless, not doing much in lockdown, but just filling my heart with just peace just brings so much life and so much joy. And it's just been really incredible for me.
Well, thank you, Hannah, for that really encouraging video.
It was great.
While we were watching it, our cakes were in the oven baking.
And they have now baked.
And they look really tasty. Would you like to start icing one?
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'm going to ice one as well.
Chocolate icing, of course.
So what's happening next, Hannah?
Well, the next video we're going to see is a talk from Mike. Now, who is Mike, you may ask? Well,
so Mike works with the Christian unions in Cambridge and Bedford, which he's actually been really passionate about since he worked on or volunteered on a Bible camp and saw someone become a Christian.
That's
amazing. Which is really cool.
And he's going to give us a talk about peace, and about peace in these really uncertain times. So I'm sure that's going to be great.
Yeah.
Over to Mike.
Over to Mike.
How would you describe how 2020 felt in one image? One metaphor? How's this? There's a sea full of tiny little boats, and then suddenly a storm comes hurling itself in. The wind is howling and the rain is lashing down and the waves are crashing over the sides of these little boats, and everyone's trying to bail out, but they're really struggling and they can't help each other. They can hardly hear each other shout across the waves, and the waves just keep churning and churning, and everyone is exhausted from the fear and from the fight to stay afloat. How's that? Boats getting caught in storms, I think, just keeps coming up in literature and in films because it's so relatable. Not just in 2020, but especially in 2020. Why? Because storms are unpredictable and uncontrollable. And the thing is, human life is like that. It's unpredictable and it's uncontrollable, and it leaves us feeling churned up and worried and anxious and exhausted. So I wonder, if I asked you, what's the biggest storm in your life right now, what you would say? And maybe for some of us it's the social stuff that's most daunting. This pandemic has just messed around with too many of our friendships. Or maybe for others of us it's thinking about the future. You know, we know that the job market is a mess and we're really struggling with our course online and we just don't know what's going to happen. For others of us it's worries about people we love who are particularly vulnerable. For others, it might be fears over our own health. For some of us, the biggest storm, as cruel as it might be, is actually inside our own minds. You know, Stephen Fry uses the imagery of the weather to talk about his own struggles with mental health because you can't control the weather. So whatever the biggest storm might be for each of us, we all want to calm it, don't we? We all want to find peace. We all want to get a bit of rest from the fight to keep our heads above water. And so the question is, how do we get that? How do we find peace in an unpredictable world? And just before we kind of jump into that, can I say, if you're living with clinical anxiety, I completely recognise that almost everything anybody ever says about how to find peace, including everything I'm about to say, mostly just feels really frustrating because it feels like, it's just not that simple. So please be patient with me. I know from experience that it's never that simple. But I do still hope that this might be helpful for you and hopeful for you. Because I think the thing is that the answers to this that our culture gives us are just way too shallow. I think actually all of us have a problem with this that goes really quite deep. And if anything is going to help, it's got to change things on that deep level. In a nutshell, I think the issue is this. Our instinctive reactions and everything that our culture encourages us to do is all about trying to get things under control, when actually what we need to do is learn how to trust. We think we need more control, but we actually need more trust. So, for instance, I think some of the most annoying stuff is the things that just tell us to get control of our own thoughts, of our own mind. You know, the mugs that just say, keep calm and carry on, as if that's something you can just do. But actually, I think what we instinctively do ourselves is not that different. What we want to do is get control over the things that worry us. So, you know, we think it through over and over again. We think about everything that might happen, everything that could go wrong, and we try to be prepared. Or if it's a work thing that worries us, we just work harder, we try harder, we get some Red Bull in and we do an all-nighter. But I've been reading this brilliant book by Sarah Wilson called First We Make the Beast Beautiful. It's about her own kind of journey struggling with anxiety over many years. And she says she recognizes this tendency in herself. And she says throughout her life it's always been destructive. Why? She says it's because if we try to deal with things that we can't control by working harder to get them under control, we're actually using anxious overthinking, anxious overworking to try and deal with our anxiety. So it's no surprise that it only makes us feel worse. It leaves us feeling more anxious, more scared, more exhausted. We're going to our problem expecting it to be the solution, which is actually a pretty good definition of addiction. It reminds me a lot of the devil's snare in Harry Potter. Do you remember that? Like, the more we struggle and fight to get control, the more the kind of tendrils of anxiety and stress wrap around us and the more suffocating it becomes. So what I found really interesting about reading Sarah Wilson's book is that she recognizes she needs to get away from this path of trying to get control. And she wants to kind of go in the opposite direction. And she sees in herself that she has this deep longing to be able to trust someone else. Time and again, she talks about how desperate she is for there to be someone else who could be in control, who would just say to her, look, it's all right, I've got this one, so that she can just rest. And as she talks about it, you can feel just how liberating that would be. But her problem is, she doesn't know who she could entrust herself to like that. She says she's learned from bitter experience over the years that you can't ask another person to take that role in your life. You can't entrust yourself to another human being who's just as small and weak and messed up as you are, because it'll just destroy you both. So she ends up talking quite a lot about trying to learn to trust the universe. But there's a very obvious problem with that, which is that the universe doesn't care about us. It can't. Now, the universe is exactly as compassionate as a brick. And you can't just sort of blindly trust that things are going to work out okay. Look at 2020. So I think all of it makes you wonder, doesn't it? If there are these two paths, how come we long for one and find ourselves constantly coming back to the other anyway? We long to be able to trust someone else, and yet we keep coming back to trying to get control of things ourselves, even though it actually only ever makes things worse. Why is it like that? Why do we do that? So we've seen that when we're dealing with the storms life throws at us, there are these two opposite paths. The path of control and the path of trust. And we keep coming back to control even though it only ever makes things worse. And the question is, why? And to answer that question, I want to share with you a true story about a boat caught in a storm that has deeply resonated with people all over the world for the last 2,000 years. It's from one of the earliest biographies of Jesus that we have by a guy called Mark. And what's happening is Jesus has been teaching from a boat all day, these crowds along the shore. And he says to his friends, his disciples, let's go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. So leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. And this happens to this day on the Sea of Galilee. Because of the geography of the area, you get these sudden, violent, unpredictable storms. Jesus was in the stern sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" So these disciples are terrified. They're just like us in the middle of the storms of life. They're trying to kind of bail out, but they're not sure they can. And so they grab Jesus and they shake him and they scream at him, "Don't you care if we drown?" And then he got up, rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." And it's a fair question, isn't it? Who is this? How come nature seems to know his voice? Who is this that when he speaks, the wildest forces act like naughty kids when the headmaster has come into the classroom? And actually, as you read through Jesus' life, you see this all over the place. The things that we find the most unpredictable, uncontrollable, forces of nature, forces of evil, sickness, even death, just bow before his utter authority. Jesus just walks through the world as if he owns the place. And the whole world acts like that's true. And so it begins to dawn on these disciples, what if he actually does own the place? What if he does have rightful authority over the whole world? What if this guy is not just a man, a good human being? What if he is the rightful king of the universe? The creator God become a human being. God with us. God right there in front of their eyes. And did you see how they felt about that? It says they were terrified. You know, he's calmed the storm. They're safe now. But they are more frightened than they were before. Why is that? Well, I think it's because they're just like us. They are control addicts. See, it's terrifying for them to be in the presence of someone who has this kind of utter, obvious authority over the world. The creator who has this absolute right to control the world that he's made. And so they realize that if that's true, he's made them too. And so he has this obvious, natural authority over their lives too. And I think that's frightening for all of us, isn't it? Because we're addicted to control. It's part of this kind of wider God complex that we all have in one way or another. You know, we want to be independent. We want to make our own rules. We want to say, I did it my way. You know, we don't want to live in someone else's universe. We are addicted to control. The only problem is, it's killing us. You know, as we've seen, it robs us of peace in ourselves, but more than that, it also destroys our peace with each other. Because this kind of drive to be in control, in the end, puts us at odds with one another. It's like a kind of self-imposed heart-level lockdown. It isolates us from each other. And underneath that, it's actually killing us because it's isolating us from God, from Jesus, the God who made us. See, the thing is, this is the reason that we long deep down for someone we can trust. We weren't made to be in control of everything. We just don't have it in us. We were made to trust the God who loves us. He has everything in perfect, good control, and we find rest and peace only when we learn to trust him. So please, let me invite you away from the path of trying to get control over things ourselves. It is not going to lead us to life. It's only going to wrap its tentacles around us tighter and tighter. Let me invite you instead to the deep, deep rest of giving up on that and, like the disciples in the boat, grabbing hold of Jesus. And did you notice how they did it? You know, they are panicked. They are angry with him. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? So look, if right now you are battered by the storms around you and inside you, and you just think, how on earth could I ever trust God if he's let all of this happen to me? Then the truth is this. You don't need to kind of tidy yourself up to grab hold of Jesus. You don't need to kind of sort your life out and calm yourself down and come to him as some kind of neat, polite, religious person. You can come to him panicked and angry and confused and say, Jesus, don't you care if I drown? And the most beautiful thing is this. If you do that, you can know for sure that the answer is yes, I care. Because you actually know something that those disciples didn't back then. You know that Jesus loves you to death. That he gave his life on the cross out of love for you. You know, I wonder if Jesus was thinking as they were screaming at him, don't you care if we drown? You have no idea how much I care about you. I don't just care if you drown. I'm going to hurl myself into the depths of the sea to make you safe. I came because I love you and I want to give my life for you on the cross. I'm going to throw myself into the deepest, darkest depths, the wildest storm imaginable, the God-forsaken death that you deserve, for the destruction that you cause to each other, for the addiction you have to yourselves, for your rejection of your loving God. I am going to plunge into those depths so that you don't have to. So that you can have peace. Peace with God and peace from God. That's how much I care about you. And to be honest, I know from experience that this isn't necessarily a kind of instant fix. You can't just click your fingers and all of those tentacles of devil's snare just untangle themselves. It takes time to get over our addiction to control. And so this isn't so much a magic wand as a path to walk along, but I promise you it is the path towards peace. And I know from experience that if you grab hold of Jesus, if you trust him, he will love you and he will forgive you and he will never leave you. And he will walk with you along that path and he'll get to work untangling the devil's snare that's wrapped around your heart and your mind. Because ultimately, we find peace not by getting control, but by giving it to him. Because we were made to trust him. So let me invite you to use this fortnight of Real to see if you can trust him. You come to the events, ask all of your questions, get hold or Google Mark's Gospel of Jesus and read about him and ask yourself, if this is what God is like, can I trust him? Because if you can, then that is where you'll find the real peace that you were made for. That is where you'll find real life.
Thank you so much for that talk, Mike. It was really interesting and it definitely made me ask some questions about peace, and it might have made you ask some questions too. What do you do if you want to talk to someone about what we've heard today?
Wow, interesting you should ask, because I have an answer. If you have any questions or would like to talk to somebody further about what you've heard today, then feel free to leave a comment under this video, or you can message us on the CU socials at UEACU on Instagram or Facebook, and someone will be able to get back to you and have a chat with you, answer your questions. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So I hope that you can join us for some of the other events over
there
the
are
next
lots more
fortnight.
fun ones coming up.
It's going to be some great fun, and the next thing happening is this Wednesday at 2 o'clock.
Yep.
Answering...
Is there more to prayer than reassurance? I did remember.
That sounds like it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
So we hope to see you there. And finally, we have finished our baking.
Oh, a reveal.
Time for the big reveal.
You ready? There you go.
And now I think it's time for us to go and eat some of these cakes. And we hope to see you around at the next few events.
Thanks for watching!
Thank you for watching!